How y'all doing today? That is fantastic! Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the channel where we are going to be diving into the NFC East as we preview that division heading into the 2023 National Football League season. Before we do that, though, I would like to ask, of course, if you have not already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoy this content or you know somebody who does enjoy this kind of content. Really helps boost the exposure of the channel, get us out to more eyeballs, more viewers. So if you have not done that already and you'd like to, please do so. That would mean the absolute world to me. And also, if you have not already, go follow me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. Helps support the channel, helps put food in my belly, and that would mean the absolute world to me. But let's get into the video. And the NFC East is not as talked about, not as hyped up as the AFC counterpart. The AFC East, which we already went over. But not to say that there isn't some intrigue surrounding this division. But I will say, as opposed to the AFC East, where it was much more of like all right, there's a bunch of teams in this division that can really, if the cards fall a certain way, this could be an absolute bloodbath of a division. Whereas with the NFC East, it's much more of a clear-cut top-tier team, with a couple teams fighting for spots and another team that's just sort of the clear bottom feeder. But with that being said, like I said, that doesn't mean that there isn't some intrigue with this, and that is what we're going to go over today. If you have not seen the previous one of the AFC East, we're going to go through position by position, ranking each team based on that position in this division, 1 through 4, talking about each one and what the starting situations are for each of those teams, according to Our Lads. Of course, not to say that Our Lads is the be-all and end-all for depth charts, but is the best source to go off of. And we are going to start this review with the quarterback position. And I'm going to say it straight up, Jalen Hurts is clearly the best quarterback in this division right now. I was stunned of the year 3 leap that he took, as well as many people. I don't even think the most optimistic of Eagles fans expected Jalen Hurts to become what he was last year. It is interesting to see what he's going to look like this year, though, now that Shane Steichen has moved on to greater pastures, at least for his own career, taking the head coaching job in Indianapolis. But Jalen Hurts, I'm not super worried about him because, as he's shown back from his days at Alabama all the way through last year, he just has this batshit crazy work ethic where back in his days at Alabama, he did not know how to play the quarterback position whatsoever. Then he transfers to Oklahoma, improves his mechanics a little bit, actually learns a little bit of how to actually read defenses a little bit at Oklahoma. It's like, all right, that's nice. He's improving, gets drafted into the second round in a weird situation where they had just paid Carson Wentz, and everyone was like, what the hell are you doing? He takes over, makes some splashes as a rookie, but looks kind of lost. Year 2, his first full year as a starter, kind of the same thing where he didn't look all that special. And then year 3, he just went absolutely super sane and just torched everybody. And it really is the showcase of not just his crazy work ethic and his ability to improve drastically every single year, but he really is the definition of what the modern quarterback is. Incredibly strong arm, physical tools out the wazoo, and his ability as a runner is what made that Eagles offense so deadly last year and what made that Eagles run game so deadly. He really was the best running back they had, and teams just didn't know how to stop it. I mean, we all saw it even in the Super Bowl multiple times throughout the playoffs last year where they had this unstoppable, I mean, everyone knew it. This QB sneak where it was like everyone knew they were going to do it. Everyone knew in short yardage situations they were going to go to it. And for some reason, they just couldn't stop it. And there is another reason for that, but we will get to that later in the video. But again, Jalen Hurts is just such a special athlete. And I think he's only going to get better, even though Shane Steichen isn't there anymore. And then Dak Prescott he is the most polarizing player in not just this quarterbacks, but probably this entire video. Dak, I don't fully know how to think about Dak Prescott. And based on most people's opinion, neither do neither do most football fans. Do you get that camp that says he's awesome, he's borderline elite, that he should be paid like such? And then there's the group of people that says he sucks, he's overrated, he's not worth the money they're paying him, he's not worth being the starting quarterback. I'm sort of in the middle of it, where he's not even remotely close to the elite status as a lot of Cowboys fans try and put him in. But that's not to say that he's not a quarterback that the Cowboys can't win with. I think he absolutely is a guy that they can absolutely win a Super Bowl with. Not necessarily because of, but he is definitely a guy, like these Jared Goffs, like these Kirk Cousins types, where they need the absolute perfect system around them in order to be successful, in order to be productive, in order to give them a best situation where they can be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And Dak Prescott is definitely in that situation this year, and I think there's a bit of pressure on him by a lot of Cowboys fans that say, all right, Dak, I mean, we'll show it later in this video, but this might be the most talented roster he's ever played with, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And there's going to be people that say, hey, Dak, if you can't win and you can't get this team far into the postseason or at least the NFC title game with this unit, will you ever? So I do think there is a bit of pressure on Dak Prescott in that regard. And then you move on to number 3, Daniel Jones, who, I mean, I was going to say he's probably the most overrated quarterback in the NFL, but, you would have to have a bunch of people that say he's excellent or elite for that to actually be like a true take to say, oh yeah, he's overrated. But I would say he's more overrated in the sense of how the Giants and how maybe the NFL views him. Here's the good things about Daniel Jones. He is a much better athlete than I think people ever give him credit for. He's much more of a running quarterback than I think people would look at him and think. People look at Daniel Jones and you think, all right, he's just your typical pocket passer at first glance. Nah, man. I mean, you saw it last year. He's got some wheels to him. He really does have some really nice wheels. So he is a better athlete than people give him credit for. And also, which was a great thing to see, which is why I think the Giants are so optimistic with him, his first few years in the league, the thing that defined Daniel Jones more than anything was turnovers. It felt like every single game, his first few years in the league, he turned the ball over at least 2 times a game. Whether that would be fumbling the football after getting hit in the pocket or throwing a boneheaded interception, he was turning the ball over at least twice a game, it felt like. Every single game the first few years. Last year, he protected the ball better than any quarterback in the league last year. And that's such a nice thing to see. Brian Daboll really came in and just completely put in a clean slate for Daniel Jones, cleaned up a lot of those issues that he had, and he protected the football extremely well. And I think that's why they were so optimistic in keeping him around, that mixed in with his underrated athleticism. And that's how you got them paying him $45 million. Now, what is Daniel Jones, a $45 million per year quarterback? Hell fucking no, he's not. I don't know why they felt like they had to pay him that much. I'm not saying they shouldn't have paid him at all. I do think he is, at this moment in time, the best option they had. But, again, $45 million per year is just ludicrous, especially considering there was another player on this team that, again, we will talk about later, that should have been paid significantly more than, well, not more than Daniel Jones, but more than that particular player got. I think you know who I will be talking about very soon. And then number 4, Sam Howell. He is officially going to be the week 1 starter, like literally today as of recording this. The Commanders, Ron Rivera, officially announced that he will be the week 1 starter. And I'm excited to see Sam Howell. I mean, you go back to, before the 2022 season, Sam Howell was routinely mocked as not just a first round talent, but he was supposed to be the best quarterback in that 2022 draft class. And then in 2022 at North Carolina, they just completely revamped everything. They got a new coaching staff where it was just RPOs out the ass. They never really let Sam Howell put any legit NFL film on tape. So as a result, that's how you get a guy that went from a first round talent to sliding all the way to the first pick of the 5th round. I don't know how Washington got him that late. I thought it was ridiculous that he fell that far. I mean, that 2022 draft class as a whole, everyone thought they were going to be higher, but they ended up slipping like rounds later than what people thought they would. And Sam Howell was the poster child for that. But, I mean, he got in a few games last year, and you saw it. You saw the flashes of the arm strength, his ability to read defenses, the athleticism, the tools. They're definitely there, and you saw them in the limited action he got to play last year. So he is going to be the opportunity to be the full-time starter this year for the Commanders, and I'm really excited to see what he can be. And there's some potential where he can overtake Daniel Jones easily, I think, by year's end, and maybe even overtake Dak Prescott potentially, because, he has an underrated group around him that we will talk about, but Sam Howell also has, like I said, he has the tools, he has the traits to be a successful quarterback at the NFL level. So I'm really excited to see what Sam Howell can do. And then we move on from the quarterback position into the running back position, where number one to me is very clearly the New York Giants, mainly because of Saquon and Saquon alone. I mean, I'll just talk about it now because it's been a hot topic of conversation for the past couple months and even into training camp with the running back position as a whole. The running back position has definitely been undervalued tremendously, but I can't sit here and say that I don't understand why. It has gone to a more pass-heavy league over the years. But even then, this idea of the running backs not getting paid hasn't really emerged as a true problem until this year. And I think it's pretty clear in my eyes as to why that is. And that's because teams have smartened up to, when you pay these running backs these big contracts, you think of the Le'Veon Bells, the Ezekiel Elliott's, I'm trying to think who else, the DeMarco Murrays. When you pay these running backs these big contracts for multiple years, most of the time it blows up in the team's face. They fizzle out within 2 years, their bodies break down, and it's a physical position. These guys played these positions since high school and sometimes even before that, and they're getting hit every single play, and their body can only take so much. That's why you see like the average career of a running back is like 3 years, and the elite ones play no further than their 30th or past the age of 30, that is. So I can understand why teams are hesitant to pay them. And I also, though, understand why the elite running backs are looking at this and say, hey, we are the best players in the NFL, or some of the best players in the NFL. We deserve to get paid accordingly, and they absolutely should. And how they do that, I don't know. Maybe they set up, I remember Brett Coleman brought up a great idea. It was something along the lines of, you pay them these big money contracts, but they don't have them levied against the team's cap per se. So it's sort of incentive-based, but sort of not. I think that would be something along those lines that would get the guys who get paid. The teams don't feel like they'd be handicapped by the contracts. So I think that would be beneficial to everyone, but that's not how it is right now. And that's how you get guys like Saquon Barkley playing on a 1-year, $11 million deal when he is worth significantly more than that. Especially considering you're talking about a team that, like I said, they paid Daniel Jones $45 million per year. You're telling me they felt more comfortable paying Daniel Jones that money, but not Saquon Barkley $15 million per year or something along those lines? It's just ridiculous, especially considering without Saquon Barkley, this Giants offense is next to nothing. He is like this Giants offense. I it's weird that I can't think of another word than this, but yeah, this Giants offense runs through Saquon Barkley, and without him, they are nothing. Because their backup right now is Matt Breida. He's another one of these old Shanahan guys from San Francisco, where he was a part of that big running back by committee thing, where he's just a straight line speed guy, and that's pretty much it. So if you have to go to him as your number one back, that's a bad thing for the most part, because Saquon Barkley is quite literally irreplaceable. He is still one of the best athletes I've ever seen. He's such an insane, elusive athlete for a guy as built as he is. I mean, it's been a running joke of how huge his fucking quads are and shit. But he is one of the elite athletes in the league for sure. And he has been dealing with injury issues in the past. Last year, he was finally able to fully stay healthy, and we saw just how much of an impact he is when he's fully healthy. And I think that's part of the reason why the Giants were hesitant to pay him, is because, he's been dealing with injury issues. And I remember before last year, I would keep saying to myself, like, it almost felt like every time you watched the Giants and every time he touched the football, you would just be sitting there crossing your fingers like, please, God, don't get hurt. And because that was just a common thing with Saquon, where it was expected he'd get hurt. And maybe that's why the Giants were hesitant. But when he's healthy, he is one of the elite. He's one of the elite players in the league, not just among running backs, but in the entire league of any position. And then he gets to number 2, which is the Philadelphia Eagles. And this might surprise some people, but I think this is the number 2 strictly just based off the tandem alone with DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Gainwell. DeAndre Swift was a guy who he was, as a result of the Lions taking Jahmyr Gibbs at the 12th pick in the draft, which I still don't understand. As a result of that, DeAndre Swift was the odd man out. And he was a guy where in Detroit, everyone was expecting him to finally break out at some point. Everyone was expecting him to take that leap into being one of the best backs in football, and it just never happened. He's still a very good running back, don't get it twisted. But as far as this, he's going to be the one of the elites in the league, or he has the potential to be one of the elites in the league, it just never happened for him in Detroit. And that's how you got him getting traded for like a day 3 pick in 2025 or something like that. And I think he's going to a really good situation with a team that knows how to run the football. And he's going to get a really nice compliment with Kenneth Gainwell, who is a better receiving back than DeAndre Swift. And Kenneth Gainwell, I'm really excited to see what he can do as a receiver. As a running back, he is solid. As just a pure runner, he is solid. But he really is a true threat as a receiving back. I mean, he wears number 14, so he almost looks like a receiver out there most times. But he is really shifty as a route runner, really good hands, really good after the catch. I'm really excited to see Kenneth Gainwell next year. And I'm also excited to see just how DeAndre Swift, with a change of scenery in another really good team with really good coaching, if he can finally... I'm not going to say if he can finally take the steps, because I'm done with the idea of DeAndre Swift finally taking a leap. But I still think he can be really productive. There's no reason why he can't, with this offensive line that they have in Philly, that he can't be as productive, if not more productive, than Miles Sanders was for them last year. So that is really intriguing. And then number 3, Tony Pollard, is in that same boat with Saquon Barkley in the sense of great running back that isn't really getting the respect as far as being paid like he should. But Tony Pollard, I mean, I've been saying for years with Zeke Elliott there that, like, hey, Tony Pollard is the best running back they have. They should make him the number 1 back and Zeke as the number 2. And they finally did it last year. And wouldn't you know it, I was right. Tony Pollard is just a monster. He's one of the most complete backs in the NFL, not just as a runner, but also he's an incredible threat as a receiver. He is so elusive after the catch. And he's so slippery of an athlete and so tough to break down. He's so elusive, and it's just so fun to watch Tony Pollard. And hopefully the injury he suffered in the playoff game against the Niners last year doesn't hinder his ability or hinder his athleticism, because he is such a game-breaking back, and he is so fun to watch. And he's now finally, he doesn't have Zeke Elliott anymore to worry about, so he is going to be the full-time number one back for this team, and I'm so freaking excited to see what that is like. And they're going to have to rely on Tony Pollard and hopefully, and hope for them that he stays healthy, because they have really nobody else after him, because their number 2 running back at the moment is a something called a Rico Dowdle or something like that. I have no idea really who he is. He didn't really play that much last year, so I don't really know how good he is. But yeah, it really is just Tony Pollard and nobody else. And then there's a clear bottom with the Washington Commanders. Not to say that this is a bad tandem. In fact, I'd argue that as far as just a pure tandem goes, they're better than both the Cowboys and the Giants, but nowhere near the upside or explosiveness. And Brian Robinson is the number 1 back. Great story, honestly. He was a guy that was drafted out of Alabama, got shot a couple days after he had gotten drafted, recovered, made a full recovery, and got in as the starting running back for the Washington Commanders and played really well. And he's not a game breaker the same way Pollard or Barkley is, or shit, even DeAndre Swift is, but he's just a very good, sound power running back that they feel comfortable giving 20 carries to a game, and he can make an impact in some way. So he is just a really good running back, not as much upside as you would maybe hope, especially considering Bama running backs from the past. He's not nearly on that level, but he's just a very good NFL starting caliber running back that they are more than comfortable with, especially if that means Antonio Gibson is not the full-time number 1 back. Antonio Gibson is now the number 2 here, and that is the perfect role for him. He is not a number 1. They try to make him a number 1, and he's just not. He's not that good of a pure runner. He's much more in that Kenneth Gainwell sense, where he's very more effective as a wide receiver. I mean, hell, that's what he was when he first went to Memphis. He was a wide receiver that got converted into running back at the University of Memphis and got drafted to Washington. And, you know, everyone was trying to get on the Antonio Gibson hype train that, oh, he's going to be great as a running back in the NFL. He's going to be one of the next elites. And I never saw that. He's just as an in-between-the-tackles runner. But as a receiving back, he is exceptional. And he is the perfect complement to Brian Robinson. And they have something there where Brian Robinson can be in their first, second downs, and then third down situations, passing situations. They bring in Antonio Gibson, and he has the ability to beat linebackers and beat safeties because he does have that wide receiver background. So that is why I say, from a pure tandem standpoint, they're better than the Giants and the Cowboys, but they rank 4th just because they don't have the upside that those teams do at that position. And then we move on to the wide receiving room, the wide receiving corps, and I'm really excited to talk about these. Again, it's a situation where there's 3 really good to great rooms and then 1 clear bottom feeder. Not to say that that bottom feeder doesn't have upside in their own right, which is why I'm so excited to talk about this. Number 1, I mean, it's clear as obvious. It's the Philadelphia Eagles. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith is, in my opinion, without a shadow of a doubt, the best wide receiving core, or the best wide receiver tandem in the NFL. The fact that the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm just going to get this out now so I don't say this the whole video. Howie Roseman is a god when it comes to being a general manager. This is Howie Roseman's world, and we're all just living in it. And A.J. Brown is a prime example as to why Howie Roseman is considered the best GM in the NFL. They were able to get him. They just had to cough up a first-round pick for him, and he has been everything they would hope to be and more. He was such a game breaker last year. He was Jalen Hurts' go-to guy. He's just that rare combination of size, speed, ball tracking, great hands, just a fucking tank to try and bring down. He is the embodiment of a true alpha number one wide receiver. And there are very few guys in the league that are better and more complete of a wide receiver than he is. And then you get to Devontae Smith, who's a number one receiver in his own right, and he has to be this team's number two, and that's just not even fair. Because, like I said, Devontae Smith, he was the ultra rare Heisman Trophy winning wide receiver from Alabama. You know, you never see wide receivers winning the Heisman Trophy. So the fact that he was in that 2020 season at Alabama just shows just how much of a great player he is. You know, everyone was criticizing him when he came out of like he's very undersized, he's very skinny. You know, they were worried that he's not going to hold up, and he has proven all those people wrong. He has great ball tracking ability, great route runner, much more physical than you'd expect at somebody his size, not afraid of contact whatsoever. And he is, like I said, he'd be a number one receiver on the vast majority of teams in the league, and he's their number two. That is fucking insane to me. And then their starting slot at the moment is Omalide Zaccheaus. They brought over as a free agent from the Atlanta Falcons. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure why. To me, he's just a smaller Quez Watkins. So they could have just kept Quez Watkins as a slot because they're both pretty much the same. They're just both speedsters and nothing else. So yeah, I didn't get the point of bringing in Omalide Zaccheaus when they already had Quez Watkins. So, I mean, it's fine. I mean, there's none wrong with having more speed, but it just felt a little redundant. And then Dallas Goedert is one of the more underrated tight ends in the league, in the sense of he should be in the conversation, you know, not with Travis Kelce, but, you know, in the conversation with the Mark Andrews, with the George Kittles as one of the true top 5 elite tight ends in the NFL. You know, he did get injured a few games last year, but in the games he did play, he was dominant as you'd expect him to be. You know, he is another one of these big-bodied wide receivers playing tight end essentially, and not as great of a run blocker, but again, in the modern NFL, in this offense, you don't really need him to be because he is just that matchup nightmare. And again, it's just this Eagles receiving core should not exist. Like, no receiving core should be this well-rounded, this complete, and yet it is. It's just, God, Howie Roseman, you're a fucking animal. And then you get to number 2 with the Dallas Cowboys, and believe it or not, people, yes, Michael Gallup is still a thing. And he has not retained the same hype that he did a few years ago, where he really asserted himself as one of the best number 2s in the league, opposite Amari Cooper, to the point where everyone thought he was just a flat-out better receiver than Amari Cooper. And there is still some of that in him. He still is that good ball winner, that good vertical ball winner, not the fastest guy in the world, but he just has really good ball tracking, is able to just get a 50-50 jump ball and has the potential to win it. But he has dealt with some injuries that has definitely held him back from reaching his full potential. And he's kind of like in that Juju Smith-Schuster role of, in the sense of he's a guy that everyone thought was going to be the potential to be a true number 1 wide receiver, and it just never worked out for them. But that's not to say that he still can't be a very good number 2, or even number 3 in this case, with the addition of Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb still being there. But I'll talk about Brandon Cooks first. He is just the model of consistency. He's been a 1,000-yard receiver every single place he's went, from New Orleans to New England to the Rams to Houston, where he was the best thing on that offense that they had outside of Laramie Tunsil. And he, like I said, he's just a guaranteed 1,000-yard receiver, and no one really seems to talk about it that much. Like, they know Brandon Cook's a good receiver, but I don't think people know how good of a receiver he is. And I think in Dallas, with this supporting cast around him, with someone like Dak Prescott, I mean, Brandon Cook's another reason why I said there's pressure on Dak Prescott of, all right, if you can't succeed in a receiving core with Michael Gallup, Brandon Cooks, and CeeDee Lamb, it's time to get out, Dak. But then you get into CeeDee Lamb, he is one of the better slot receivers in the league, though I don't think he's on the same level as someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown, in my opinion. He is a little overrated in that regard. I mean, that's just what happens when you play wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys and you wear number 88. Cowboys fans will hype you up to be better than I think you actually are. He's not in the same level as some of the best receivers in the league, but as a slot receiver, he is still a very, very good player. He has the ability to separate. He has the speed to break away. He is a very good route runner, really good ball tracking ability. He is what this team needs. So they are very lucky to have someone like CeeDee Lamb. And this is another really good, complete receiving core. I feel like the Dallas Cowboys always have these really good receivers, and it will be more of the same this year. And then Jake Ferguson at tight end. They let Dalton Schultz walk in the offseason. He went and signed with the Houston Texans, and everyone was saying, like, can Jake Ferguson take over that role? I say absolutely he can, because Jake Ferguson is basically a Dalton Schultz clone. He plays exactly like him, where he's more of a receiver than a blocker, looks exactly like Dalton Schultz, not just physically, but just as a player, just as a route runner, blocking on the run. Even after the catch, I am not kidding when I say he looks like they took Dalton Schultz and copy and pasted him and put him in number 87. He is literally a Dalton Schultz clone. And then you move on to number 3 with the Washington Commanders, and Terry McLaurin is the clear-cut number 1, and I think at this point he's almost underrated. Terry McLaurin doesn't get nearly as much respect as he should, and if he just had consistent quarterback play, like consistent, not even great quarterback play, just consistent good quarterback play, he would be in this conversation of the top 10 receivers in the NFL. Among your A.J. Browns, among your Justin Jeffersons even, among your Devontae Adams as one of the elite receivers in football and be viewed widespread like that. He is one of the more complete receivers in the NFL. Not so much from a size standpoint, because he is a little on the smaller side of things, but he is such a great route runner, such great ball tracking ability, like probably arguably the best ball tracker of anybody in the league as far as elite receivers go. He is so fun to watch, and hopefully he's why I hope Sam Howell develops into what we think Sam Howell can be, because if he does, then that means Terry McLaurin will not only eat as a result of it, but he will finally get the respect widespread among the league and the notoriety widespread among the league that he absolutely deserves. And then Jahan Dotson is a number 2. He's a guy that they spent a first-round pick on last year at Penn State. Some people were saying overdraft, and I can understand why some people thought that, because he wasn't as good as some of the receivers in that class was. But he's still an excellent receiver in his own right. Incredible hands. I mean, we knew that from his days in Penn State. He has one of the best hands in that draft class last year, and he showed it last year. He's very good route runner, very shifty, very good after the catch, excellent hands. He is the perfect complement to Terry McLaurin. And then Curtis Samuel, who is still here. They gave him a big contract a couple off seasons ago. Not as productive as that contract would probably indicate, but he is essentially what they brought him in for, which is he's their gadget piece. He's good as a slot receiver. He's fine to good as a slot receiver, but he really is this team's, he is the Swiss Army knife as far as they use him as a lot of jet sweeps. They'll use him out of the backfield sometimes as a runner. That's what he's best at, and that's what they use him for. And it's really interesting to see how Eric Bieniemy will use a guy like Curtis Samuel this year. So that'll be really fascinating. And then Logan Thomas is on the down tick of his career. His athleticism starting to taper off a little bit. He dealt with injuries last year. He was just a solid, fine starting tight end before that, and now he's on the regression to just being very, very replaceable. And then you get to number 4 with the New York Giants. And this is very clearly the worst in this group. But like I said earlier in the segment, they do definitely have some upside. Isaiah Hodgins really broke out in the second half of last year. Excellent hands, excellent route runner. And he is kind of this team's number 1 wide receiver at the moment, which I don't hate because he was really fun to watch last year. And he did play like a legit number 1 last year, or in the latter half of last year. So it'll be very interesting if he can keep that up next year, even if he is just what he was in the second half of last year all the way through. That's still a very good starting caliber receiver in the NFL. And they just really needed somebody like that because the rest of this group is, as far as the receivers go, has a lot to be desired. Darius Slayton, they brought him back. He is what you see is what you get. A vertical threat, has some speed to him, but definitely has battled drop issues in the past. And you even saw last year he still had drop issues, and he's just very inconsistent when it comes to his hands. Is a bit of a fan favorite to an extent, but like I said, what you see is what you get. You don't get much upside from him. And sort of the same thing with Paris Campbell, where he is kind of in that mold of everyone expected him to break out for years in Indianapolis, where everyone was like, watch out for Paris Campbell, he can finally break on, and it never happened for Paris Campbell. And I don't know, maybe something will happen with him this year, getting into Brian Daboll's offense, see if Brian Daboll can figure out how to use Paris Campbell to his abilities, and maybe he can finally hit that potential that we thought he could hit when the Colts drafted him out of Ohio State. Maybe, but I'm not, putting all my eggs in that basket. But there's not really much upside from the wide receivers, so that makes the addition of Darren Waller that much bigger. Darren Waller, I don't think he's in that top 3 tight end position conversation that he was a few years ago, but he's still an excellent tight end with a lot of upside. And I think if he can stay healthy in Brian Daboll's offense, I think he can return to that form that he was in his prime with the Las Vegas Raiders. So it'll be very fun to see if Darren Waller can stay healthy and how Brian Daboll can use him. So I'm very excited to see how that looks. But as a whole, compared to all the other receiving corps in this division, the New York Giants are very clearly at the bottom of that. And then we move on to the offensive line, where there is just a clear-cut number 1. The Philadelphia Eagles are not just the best offensive line in this division. They are without a shadow of a doubt, the best offensive line in football. I don't know, and if you try and dispute that, you are an absolute moron, because you saw it last year. This offense and this Eagles team basically made it to the Super Bowl because of how dominant this offensive line was. Not just in pass protection, but also in the run game. I mean, they were destroying teams in the run game. Jordan Mailata has asserted himself as one of the best left tackles in the NFL. He was a guy that a lot of people were stunned when they gave him a contract before the season, because many people hadn't heard of Jordan Mailata. Now they do, and they understand when they watched him last year, like, oh, that's why they paid him the money they did, because he is just an absolute monster of a human. Landon Dickerson has been very good ever since they drafted him out of Alabama. He's another guy that's just dominant in the run game. Jason Kelce, he's coming back for another year. I mean, he's a future Hall of Famer that is, again, just a model of consistency, where he has been the staple and he has been the heart and soul of this Eagles offensive line for over a decade now. And I mean, not just the heart and soul of this offensive line, he's the heart and soul of really this team. So to get him back, even though he has regressed a little bit as far as his ability as a player is concerned, he is still crucial to this team, and he is what helps this offensive line be as dominant as it is. And then Cam Jurgens is listed as this team's right guard for the moment. He is a backup center with a lot of athletic upside. He was drafted as basically the predecessor of Jason Kelce. I don't know why I blanked on his name for a second. but he was drafted to be the Jason Kelsey replacement. But they have him at guard right now, and he has the athletic upside to play it right now. And he is sort of the weak link of the unit. But if he's your weak link, that is telling of just how great this line is. And then Lane Johnson, he's another guy kind of in that Jason Kelsey situation where, you don't know when he's going to hang him up. But when he's just been one of the dominant right tackles in the league ever since he got into the league out of Oklahoma. Just always been a freak athlete, model of consistency, just like Jason Kelsey. And sort of like Kelsey in the sense of he's sort of been on and off as far as when he's going to retire, if he's going to retire. He has dealt with injuries in the past, dealt with some mental health issues in the past. But he is still here. He is still going to be this team's right tackle. And again, he's the same conversation like Jason Kelsey, where he is one of the heart and souls of this team. And if he's able to just even be half of what he was in his prime, that's still a really good starting right tackle. So yeah, nobody's beating this offensive line in any sense. No defensive line's going to beat their ass. No offensive line's going to rival them. I don't think we'll ever see an offensive line this well constructed and this dominant. And now we have to talk about the rest of the teams, which is not as fun, but there are still really good units here. Tyron Smith is nearly 40, if he isn't 40 already. I don't know how he's still playing. He's just been dealing with injury issues constantly throughout the latter half of his career. I don't think he's remotely close to the elite left tackle that he once was, but he's still solid when he has been out there. But it's just when he's out there, because he has been dealing with a lot of issues, and that's why they drafted Tyler Smith in the first round last year out of Tulsa. And Tyler Smith, spending a first-round pick on him was risky because he was not ready to play tackle right away. I mean, even then, he played as well as at tackle last year as you could have expected somebody who was as raw as him playing. But the goal is to hopefully have Tyron Smith be as healthy for as many games as possible and just keep Tyler Smith at guard as he develops. And then hopefully with his athletic upside, he can develop where you do feel comfortable putting him at left tackle full time, because he has the athletic tools to do that. I mean, he was a freak athlete coming out of Tulsa. So that's the plan with Tyler Smith. And then Tyler, I'm going to butcher this last name, Biadasz or something like that. I'm sorry if I butcher that name. I still don't know how to pronounce his name. He's their starting center at the moment, and he is definitely this unit's weak link. But if your weak link is your center, that's fine. But not, he's sort of just a fine starting center. Nothing too crazy, but you could definitely do better than him. And then Zach Martin, again, he's another guy, future Hall of Famer, same like Tyron Smith. But he was in a situation where you almost didn't have him this year because he did hold out, wanted a new contract. They finally came to an agreement on that. And that's huge because he is not just their best offensive lineman right now, but he's been their best offensive lineman ever since they drafted him. He's been just one of the best pass blocking guards in the league, he's just been one of the best overall guards ever since he came to the league out of Notre Dame. And he is a first ballot Hall of Famer through and through. And I can't see him taking any regression this year. I just don't see it happening. And then Terrence Steele at their right tackle, he's just a really good tackle. I mean, a 6th round pick a few years ago. And he was a guy that no one really expected when he took the starting job at right tackle to really do anything. But he's been very solid for them. He's just been very reliable for them. Not the greatest athlete, but, that's fine because he is very technically sound. And he is just very solid. And they're happy with what they are getting from Terrence Steele at right tackle. And then number 3 with the New York Giants. And Andrew Thomas is legitimately a top 5 left tackle in the NFL. And you wouldn't know that because he was left off the NFL players top 100 players list this year, which that is just another indication of that list being just an absolute joke now, because there's no reason Andrew Thomas shouldn't have been on that list, because he is just the definition of one of the elites in the league at this position. Phenomenal athlete, exceptional pass blocker, dominant run blocker, just very technically sound, amazing core strength to just stonewall edge rushers. And the fact that he still, even among his peers apparently, has not been getting the respect that he absolutely deserves is just ludicrous. And hopefully by year's end, he will officially assert himself of, no, I am not just one of the best tackles in the league. I have the potential to be the best left tackle in all of football. I could totally see Andrew Thomas being that by year's end. And then it's, less good once you look at the rest of these guys. Ben Bredesen is definitely the worst of these guys. And he's just sort of fine. You could do worse than him, but you can also do significantly better than Ben Bredesen. He's just the definition of fine across the board. John Michael Schmitz, they spent a second-round pick on him out of Minnesota, and they could have drafted John Michael Schmitz in the first round, and it would have still made all the sense in the world. He is very technically sound. He's a 24-year-old rookie. He's an old rookie coming into the league, but he's just he is an excellent run blocker, very good pass blocker. It's rare to find an offensive lineman that polished straight out the gate, which makes sense because you'd hope so. He is 24 years old, but he is listed as the starting center right away. He is going to be the starting center, and that's not shocking whatsoever. I'm very excited to see how John Michael Schmitz performs in year one because he is so technically sound right out the gate. Mark Glowinski is the starting right guard, and, they did pay him. They brought him in a couple years ago, and he's just... he's sort of same as Ben Bredesen, where they're just sort of, you could do better, but you can also do worse. And then Evan Neal is somebody that I really want to talk about because I was shocked at how bad Evan Neal was as a rookie. I thought he was going to come in year one and just not dominate right off the rip, but still show signs of all right, he has those athletic traits to him, and he's just going to be very solid in year one, and then he's just going to progress as it goes along, kind of the same as Andrew Thomas. But last year was just a train wreck. I don't know what happened with Evan Neal. Maybe it is a situation where, he played left tackle at Alabama and they moved him over to right. Maybe that is a situation where it's, he's just not comfortable on the right side. That is a real thing where guys are just more comfortable playing on one side than the other. I remember another guy like that was Justin Herron for the New England Patriots, where he played right tackle and he was awful. He was horrendous. He legit cost that team games playing right tackle. But then they moved him over to left and he was really good. Maybe that's the same thing with Evan Neal, where he's just more comfortable on the left, but you don't want him playing left because Andrew Thomas is Andrew Thomas. So he's going to have to play right, and he's going to have to learn how to play right and be comfortable on the right side. And we don't know how long that's going to take. And you're nervous that he doesn't ever get comfortable on the right side. And all of a sudden you're looking at a situation where he is a bust. And I don't want to put that label on him after year one. But, if you get past year 3 and he's still not comfortable on the right side, then that is something you have to talk about when it comes to Evan Neal. And then you get to number 4 with the Washington Commanders. And I'm just going to skim by this team because the less we say about this offensive line, the better. Charles Leno is the best guy they have right now. He's just very solid. He's up there in age, but he is still a very good starting caliber left tackle in the NFL. Very good run blocker, average as a pass blocker, but he's still fine. There will be a couple games where he goes against elite pass rushers and he'll just get destroyed. But even then, he was very solid for many years in Chicago. He was solid for the Commanders. And he is, like I said, he is the best offensive lineman they have right now. So that's the good news. The bad news is he's the best offensive lineman they have right now. Because as you go inside, Sadiq Charles is the left guard at the moment, and he's just fine run blocker, and that's pretty much it. Nick Gates, who they brought over from the Giants, he was a guard. He's currently listed as their starting center, so interesting to see how that plays out. But he's, again, same thing, where it's just he's an average starting offensive lineman. I think he'll take the center just fine. But he played guard with the Giants, just very sound, solid, not going to be a problem for you. But again, you would want somebody better than him. And then Sam Cosmi was drafted as a tackle. They put him in at guard at the moment. You know, you don't see a lot of 6'7" guards, and that's what Sam Cosmi is right now. And you don't really want your guards being that huge because, you know, when you're going against defensive tackles, you're not going to win leverage games a lot of the time because they are so tall. And Sam Cosmi, you're worried that he is in that same realm of he's going to struggle in pass protection because he is so tall playing guard. But he does have all the athletic tools for it. You know, I feel more comfortable if he was, you know, playing tackle, like if Charles Leno, because he is up there in age, once he retires, you kick Charles Leno, or not Charles Leno, you kick Sam Cosmi back out to guard and move Andrew Wiley onto the left side potentially, because I feel like that would be the best situation for the future, is having Andrew Wiley play left tackle and having Sam Cosmi play right tackle. I think that'd be the beneficial move in the future. But for this year, you have Sam Cosmi playing guard. He is a good enough run blocker to do it, but the height will definitely hold him back in that regard. And then Andrew Wiley is just fine. He was really the big offense. He was the big offseason acquisition on this offensive line, and really just for this whole team, which was sad because, you know, he's just kind of fine. He got a big contract because there wasn't really a whole lot of other offensive linemen in the free agent market that the Commanders really had a great shot at getting. So they had to chuck a bunch of money at Andrew Wiley, who really isn't deserving of that money, but it's what you see is what you get, and he's just fine. And now we're going to move on to the defensive side of the ball, with the defensive line to start. And to me, this is the only time where the Commanders will be by far and away the best out of the rankings. This defensive line they have is insane. We're going to talk about Chase Young first, because Chase Young is a guy that, you know, they drafted him with the second overall pick in 2020. Everyone thought he was going to be in that Nick Bosa level conversation by the time his rookie contract ends. And Nick Bosa is one of the elites, if not the elite pass rusher in the NFL. And Chase Young is still kind of what he was as a rookie. And that is when he's been able to stay on the field, because he has dealt with a lot of injury issues since his rookie year. And I think he won Defensive Rookie of the Year his first year. I could be mistaken on that, but I'm almost positive it did, because he was dominant his rookie year. And he just hasn't been able to build off of that. So as a result, he's been kind of the weak link of this unit, especially as everybody else in the unit has improved significantly since his rookie year. Starting with Jonathan Allen, who he is one of the premier defensive tackles in the NFL. He's a captain of this team. He is just a dominant force, both as a pass rusher and solid as a run defender. Same thing with Daron Payne, who he has slowly developed over the years, but he has asserted himself close to that Jonathan Allen level. Dominant pass rusher, excellent run defender. That interior duo alone is enough to make them one of the best in the league. And then you talk about Montez Sweat on the other edge, that has really kind of broken out over these past couple years and asserted himself as kind of a borderline alpha pass rusher for the most part on the edge, where he has just insane athleticism, incredible bend, great power. He's actually able to develop a full pass rush set, which was not what he had coming out of college. But he finally has come into his own and asserted himself. And there's also Fedarian Mathis in there. They drafted him in the second round last year out of what was it, Alabama, and he's just fine. He'll be a good rotation piece. Just a good enough run defender, so you don't have to keep Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen out there all the time. So he's good rotation in that regard. But yeah, it really is just a defensive line that's just waiting for Chase Young to catch up to them, which you'd thought after his rookie year wouldn't be the case, but that's just what sort of has happened, where he has been battling injuries, and when he's been on the field, he hasn't been able to improve on what he was in his rookie year. And it's kind of sad, but even then, it's not enough to say that to really hold this unit back, because this is still one of the premier units in the NFL as far as the D-line goes. And then you go down, number 2, the Dallas Cowboys, where Micah Parsons I'm not going to say this lightly. When I say this, I do genuinely mean this. Micah Parsons is the modern day Lawrence Taylor. He is the closest thing to Lawrence Taylor that we have gotten since LT. He is just the definition of a shit wrecker. He is unblockable. He is really good covering running backs out of the backfield, but people don't talk about it that much because of how dominant he is as a pass rusher. He is a definition of a guy quarterbacks fear, that he is the guy that you circle of, all right, we got to locate him, and how do we stop him? And I don't know if he will ever slow down. I think he'll just keep getting better and better and better, and it won't be too long until he is in the conversation of he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer one day. He is that great, and he's that dominant. And that's not to take anything away from his running mate on the other side of the ball with DeMarcus Lawrence, who is an alpha, true number 1 pass rusher in his own right. And, he's kind of taken a down tick over the past couple of years, has dealt with some injuries here and there, but he is still an excellent pass rusher. And, again, you can't block both these guys. And that's what makes this pass rush so deadly, is you can't focus on just Micah Parsons because you got to worry about DeMarcus Lawrence. You can't worry about DeMarcus Lawrence because you're worried about Micah Parsons wrecking your shit. And you can't worry about both those guys because Osa Odighizuwa really came on towards the end of last year. So, and then speaking of Odighizuwa, they spent, a second-round pick of it out of UCLA, I think it was. And he really came into his own last year, where he really was excellent as a pass rusher, improved as a run defender, and he should only get even better this year going into year 3. And especially so with not just those edge rushers, but with the addition of first-round pick Mazi Smith out of Michigan. And he was what this team desperately needed. And because you saw it last year, as great as they were as a pass rush unit, they could not stop the run to save their fucking lives. And that's what makes the pick of Mazi Smith so consequential, so important, was that he is that true nose tackle that can be just a space eater that can play the run excellent. Not as dominant as a pass rusher, but with the guys they have around them, they don't need him to be a dominant pass rusher. He's just a guy that will eat space, eat up blockers, so hopefully everybody else can defend the run. And that's good because like I said, they couldn't defend the runs if their lives depended on it last year. So having the addition of Mazi Smith is crucial. And then you go down to the Philadelphia Eagles, and I know some people will say, they're only number 3 in this division? They were number 1 in the league in sacks last year. Yeah, they were. But I'm interested to see how these guys look with Jonathan Gannon leaving when he took the head coaching job for the Arizona Cardinals. So I'm interested to see how this unit performs outside of that system. And they were number 1 in sacks last year because of a lot of manufactured pressures. They ran a lot of stunts. They had a bunch of guys coming in on loops and manufacturing guys to become unblocked. They were just insane when it came to pressure last year. And I do think, will still be that good, or at least maintain it, especially with the drafting of Jalen Carter, who, if he didn't have all those off-the-field concerns right before the combine, he would have been probably the number one pick in the draft if Chicago didn't move off that spot. Like, had Jalen Carter not had those issues, you are definitely looking at a situation where I don't know if it's a guarantee that Chicago trades the number one pick. They probably would have just stuck and took it and taken Jalen Carter, number one overall. Instead, he falls to fucking Philly. And this is the perfect landing spot for him. He is the definition of just a shit wrecker. I think in a year or two, he can surpass Aaron Donald as the best defensive tackle and the most feared defensive tackle in the NFL. And in this unit, with this team, with this coaching, there's no reason why he can't be that. Especially with Fletcher Cox right next to him, who is the perfect mentor for someone like Jalen Carter. You know, he's been in the league for so many years, been a great D tackle for so many years. Definitely has fallen off the past couple seasons because he has gotten up there in age. He's not the player he once was, but he's still a really good tackle, or really good defensive tackle, still a good enough pass rusher despite his age. And like I said, he'll be the perfect mentor for someone like a Jalen Carter. And as far as these edge rushers go, Josh Sweat really came on last year, really bendy, really great athlete. And Hassan Reddick himself is a very bendy, very great athlete who finally asserted himself as one of the more underrated edge rushers in Philadelphia last year. And also, not listed here is Nolan Smith, who was the other defensive tackle, or not defensive tackle, other first-round pick for the Philadelphia Eagles, also out of Georgia. Nolan Smith, very undersized, but also very bendy. Insane athlete, especially insane speed coming off the line. And it won't be too long until he becomes a full-time starter for this team. Maybe overtakes Hassan Reddick if they let him walk in the future, or even just if they feel like he's better than Josh Sweat. But I feel like in short time, he will eventually work his way to the full-time rotation. And then you get to the New York Giants, and this Giants team, they are number 4, but it's a situation where somebody had to rank last, and this is an excellent defensive line in their own right. And it starts with Dexter Lawrence, who he was another one of those guys in 2019 for the first round for the Giants where everyone just shat on. You know, that was the draft they took Daniel Jones, 6th overall, and they took Dexter Lawrence with the 17th overall pick, and everyone was just shitting on them. Everyone was like, so you took a 3rd-round caliber quarterback with the 6th overall pick, and he took a nose tackle with the 17th overall pick. You know, what the hell are they doing? But Dexter Lawrence has just been a superstar, whereas Daniel Jones has been much more like controversial of if he's good or not. There's no debate on how good Dexter Lawrence is. He is asserted himself as an elite pass rusher. I mean, we knew he was going to be an excellent nose tackle as far as defending the run, but he has really been dominant as a pass rusher, especially last year, and I think he'll only get better as time goes on, especially considering teams will have to worry about Kayvon Thibodeau on the outside, first-round pick they drafted last year that should have been in the conversation for the number 1 overall pick last year, but wasn't. You know, because everyone was talking about like all these like character issues. He doesn't really care about the game. He just cares more about his brand. Like, I still to this day don't know what the fuck that was all about. But he went in for the New York Giants as a rookie and played just as well as you expect him to as a rookie. Has all the physical tools you could possibly imagine for an edge rusher. Excellent against the run. Excellent against the pass. He has just been... I think same thing with Dexter Lawrence, where he'll only get better, and within a couple of years, he will be one of the premier edge rushers in the conversation with the Nick Bosas, the Myles Garretts of the world. He absolutely, I don't think he can be, I think he will be. So I'm really excited to see this D-line just for those two guys alone. And then you get to guys like Azeez Ojulari, who was a 2nd-round pick out of, I want to say Texas? I could be wrong. I could be thinking of Joseph Osai, but I think Azeez Ojulari came out of Texas. I could be wrong on that. But this is his 3rd year going into the league now, and he's just very solid. You were worried that they were going to have to rely on him as the number one pass rusher. Well, now you don't because Kayvon Thibodeau's on the other side. But Azeez Ojulari is another guy where he's kind of like Josh Uche, very undersized, but also very bendy, very quick of an athlete. So I'm very excited to see what Azeez Ojulari can do with Kayvon Thibodeau developing more and Ojulari developing his game a little more. And then Leonard Williams, I'll say this. I'll put it this way. Dexter Lawrence is what everybody thought Leonard Williams was going to be when he came out of USC and he was drafted by the New York Jets. Everyone thought he was just going to be this shit wrecker of a defensive tackle where he's dominant against the run and dominant against the pass. And it just never turned into that. He was fine with the Jets, came to the Giants, was just fine. But he's the perfect complement to Dexter Lawrence, and he can get into a situation where Lawrence will take up a bunch of double teams, and Leonard Williams will have the ability to work a lot of one-on-one pass rush reps because he does still have the athletic traits and the ability to win consistently one-on-one against the guard. So as a result, this is actually a really well-rounded defensive line unit, and it's a situation where they rank fourth because, well, somebody in this division had to. So, yeah, that's sort of the D-line unit. And then we get to the linebackers. And this is a little more tricky to talk about because, there's no real linebacking cores in the league that are super dominant. And this is sort of that same realm where number one is the Dallas Cowboys. Leighton Vander Esch, not as good as he once was. The hype on him has definitely died down over the years. I remember when he came out of Boise State, his first few years, he was just dominant. He was the next great linebacker. He's old school, big as shit. Everyone thought he was going to really be one of the elite linebackers in the league, and it just sort of never happened. It was the same thing with his old running mate in Jalen Smith, where, he was great for a while and then just tapered off into nothingness. But they're hoping to move off of Leighton Vander Esch in the future eventually because they're hoping that Damon Clark, who they drafted in, the 5th or 6th round last year, can overtake that and be what they thought, someone like a Jalen Smith could be, but do it for longer. Damon Clark was a guy who at LSU last year was an excellent player, but fell in the draft because he had injury concerns. And as a result, slipped into the 5th round, played at the halfway point of last year. And I'm not going to say he was great or anything, or if he was a game changer, but he played relatively well for a rookie linebacker who was battling injuries and didn't really participate in training camp in his rookie year as a result. And he played relatively well for them last year, and he's going to get the opportunity to be a full-time starter this year. And I'm excited to see what he can be because he has the athletic tools, and I want to see what he looks like with a full offseason to actually prepare, a full training camp where he's healthy, get some preseason action, and be the full-time starter. I'm so excited to see what he is able to do. And then the third linebacker is DeMarvin Overshown, a guy out of Texas who they drafted in the 3rd round. Athletic guy that we'll see if he can develop. And you're hoping if he does that maybe they have a good young linebacking duo with Clark and Overshown, but we'll have to wait and see. And then number 2 is the Philadelphia Eagles. Nakobe Dean is their best linebacker at the moment. He will be their full-time starter with TJ Edwards not being there anymore. And I just want to say this about Nakobe Dean. Everyone, when he got drafted, there were a lot of people that were saying that he's not going to be as good in the NFL because, he is very undersized and he's not your typical linebacker where he is going to get moved off the ball, or not moved off the ball, but he is going to get dominated in run situations because he is so undersized. And a lot of people, myself included, said he wasn't going to be as successful because he's not going to be playing behind that dominant defensive line in Georgia. And wouldn't you know it, here he is in Philadelphia in year 2, and he's playing behind, quite literally, the exact same defensive line that he had in Georgia. because Jalen Carter, who they drafted, not shown in the graphic that I completely forgot about, not shown in that graphic for the D-line, was Jordan Davis, who they spent a first-round pick on last year. He's just a tank of a guy that I think will overtake Fletcher Cox when he eventually retires. And then Nolan Smith, who was the other guy they drafted. and then you talk about Nakobe Dean, who they drafted last year, and then Keely Ringo, who was a safety they drafted this past year as well. And everyone's just like, man, they're turning into the Philadelphia Bulldogs this year. But yeah, Nakobe Dean, he is very good against the pass, and I think that's why they value him so much, is because, you have to have your linebackers that cover really well. But against the run, I think he's going to get absolutely deleted because he is so undersized. But it is nerve-wracking because he is their best linebacker, because their number 2 linebacker right now is Nicholas Morrow, who I don't really know much about. They didn't really pay him that much in the offseason, and there's probably a reason for that, because, bringing him over from Chicago probably isn't really all that good. So yeah, they are relying on Nakobe Dean to be their best linebacker. And then Washington at number 3, Cody Barton, just a solid linebacker that they brought over from Seattle. Fine against the run, decent in coverage. Just, again, he's another one of those guys where he's just sort of you could do definitely worse than him. You're happy to have him as a starter, but you could definitely do better than him. But the guy they're really hoping develops is Jamin Davis, who they spent a first-round pick out of Kentucky back in 2021. Was putrid as a rookie. Definitely made some improvement last year, and they're hoping that he develops because he is, again, in that mold of the modern linebacker where he's not the biggest guy, but he's really athletic. Hopefully can develop as a coverage linebacker. Definitely, hopefully he develops as a run defender. But he is the athletic upside that they spent a first-round pick on, that they're hoping develops very quickly and hopefully develops this year. And we'll see what he looks like by year's end. And then the New York Giants at 4, they brought in Bobby Okereke in the offseason from the Indianapolis Colts. And he's just a very solid, good linebacker where he's sort of bigger than the average linebacker now. A bit of a thumper, decent in coverage. He's just very solid all around. And they are very fortunate that they have him because they got jack and shit behind him. Their other linebacker at the moment is Micah McFadden, who got some reps last year and was kind of bad. So it really is Bobby Okereke and nothing else. We'll see what Micah McFadden turns into, but you're not really expecting anything out of him. And then last, but certainly not least, is the secondaries. And number 1 is the Philadelphia Eagles. And I was shocked that they were able to sort of retain this core for the most part from last year, especially considering both their corners, Darius Slay and James Bradberry, were set to be free agents last year. Actually, no. Bradberry was, and they were able to retain him, but they actually cut Darius Slay, but then they brought him back on a cheaper deal. So that was very fortunate because Darius Slay and James Bradberry is, in my opinion, the best corner tandem in the NFL. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that rivals them. But Darius Slay is, he's just been the model of just great cornerback play, even going back to his days in Detroit. And he's come to Philly where I thought he's even been better than he was at Detroit, which is saying a lot because, he got the name Big Play Slay from his days with the Lions, because he was just a ball hawk, a sticky corner. And I think he's gotten even better since he's arrived in Philadelphia. Same as James Bradberry, where he was just a solid corner for a long time, went to the Giants and really established himself as a great elite corner, borderline elite corner. And then he's gotten even better coming here to Philadelphia, where they really knew how to utilize these guys, and he's become even better than he was with the Giants. The safety position is a little bit of a question mark. Reed Blankenship played relatively well for the most part last year. I'm excited to see what he can do with more full-time starter reps and if he can develop more. They brought in not Tremaine Edmonds. His brother is Tremaine Edmonds. Terrell Edmonds First round pick for the Steelers back in 2018. And Steelers fans were very up and down on him. Most fans said that he sucked because he over pursued a lot, was sort of a liability in coverage at times. And it kind of is. But he's sort of another one of these guys that are just an influx in the league now of these hybrid safety linebacker types. I do think he's better in coverage than people give him credit for. And there are times where he over pursues a little too much. But he is just a good, what you expect out of the modern strong safety, where you expect him to match up relatively well on tight ends and running backs. But he also has the ability to just come down and be a thumper, because he absolutely is a thumper. And then Avonte Maddox is just a really good slot corner. He's sort of the cherry on top of this secondary, where he can play outside, but he's much better inside playing the slot. He has the speed and athleticism to do that. And like I said, he's sort of the cherry on top of this secondary. And then the Dallas Cowboys. This is a really fun unit to talk about. Stephon Gilmore, who they traded for in the offseason, huge addition. He's not as good as he was in his days in New England or even his days in Buffalo, but he's still a really good starting caliber corner who really had a bit of a career resurgence in Indianapolis last year. Not so much where he's back to being one of the top 10 corners in football, but still like top 15 corners in football. He was brought back to that level in Indianapolis last year. He was one of the few bright spots on that defense for the Indianapolis Colts last year, and that was really good to see. And then the corner opposite him, Trayvon Diggs, very polarizing because he was viewed as an elite corner because he made the Pro Bowl in 2021, because he led the league in interceptions, despite the fact that he gave up more yards than any starting corner that same year. So as a result, I thought he was overrated, but he definitely got much better last year. He was much more locked down in that sense. He still gave up the occasional big play, but he was very more disciplined as far as not letting guys get by him. And we already know how tremendous he is from a ball skills standpoint. So if you throw it his way and he has an opportunity to make a play on it, he's going to pick it 9 times out of 10. But it was just the pure coverage aspect that he struggled at, but he definitely improved on a lot last year. And I think the hype is a little more warranted on Trayvon Diggs from last year's performance rather than his 2021 performance, where I feel like it just kind of gotten blown out of the water a little bit. And then Jordan Lewis is just a solid slot corner. Same thing as Avonte Maddox, though not as good, where it's sort of what you see is what you get. Sound, good technique, good athleticism for the most part, and just not a ton of true upside from him, though. And then these safeties I'm really curious to talk about. This is probably the most underrated safety duo in the league. Jaron Kearse has been there for a bit. Very excellent tackler, underrated as far as a coverage player goes. Dealt with injuries a little bit, but he is very good. I think he'll be much better this year than he was even his first couple of years. And then Donovan Wilson had a breakout year last year. He really asserted himself as one of the most underrated players in football. Excellent blitzer. I think he had 5 sacks last year on just safety blitzes. I think he had over 100 tackles total last year. He really emerged as a guy that by this year's end or even a couple of years can be one of the elite safeties in the NFL. He was that good for them last year. And then the Washington Commanders at number 3. This is a bit of an interesting group because you have Kendall Fuller, who's been there for a long time and he's all reliable. Very good athlete, great, technically sound. He's not a superstar, but you are happy with him being your number one corner for sure. Same with Cameron Curl, where he's been there for a while. Excellent, sort of underrated safety. Not as good as in coverage. Much more physical as a run defender, though. He is at his best when he is just running downhill to make a tackle on a running back, but in safety, in coverage, he is very hit or miss. Derek Forrest, Had a bit of a breakout year last year. He was really good for them. And he is definitely the athletic upside. He's the youth. He's the upside in this safety room. And I'm excited to see how Derek Forrest improves. I wouldn't be shocked within a couple of years he is. Same thing as Donovan Wilson, where he's one of the premier safeties in the league. I would not be shocked by that whatsoever. And then Emmanuel Forbes is the interesting piece here, because Emmanuel Forbes, they spent about a first round pick on him this year over guys like Christian Gonzalez and Deonte Banks, who I thought were significantly better players than Emmanuel Forbes, but I understand why they prioritized him. He is at his best when he is in these, Fangio-style quarters systems where he is playing off coverage, he's playing zone, because he is the definition of a ball hawk. What was it? I think it was like 17 interceptions over his last 2 years at Mississippi State or something insane like that. The most interceptions in a career, not just in the SEC, but in college football history. Emmanuel Forbes holds that record. And that's why they drafted him in the first round, because he has that he has tremendous ball skills. He has that ability to take the football away. But the biggest red flag with him is he is 166 pounds at 6'1". He is a walking stick. If you have him playing press man, he is going to be destroyed. Now, I will say in Mississippi State, he was much more of a physical run defender than I expected of somebody at his size. But there is definitely question marks because of how small he is, of if he's going to be able to hold up against the guys in his division like A.J. Brown, where I am just sort of scared for his life in that situation. And you hope Emmanuel Forbes doesn't have to go against A.J. Brown. But that is sort of the trade-off that you have with someone of his ball skill ability. And then Benjamin St-Juste, just a really good corner that kind of took a dip off last year, especially from a tackling standpoint. But he's just a very good, sound corner that is going to be playing in the slot a little bit. So he should be a fine piece. That'll be a nice round out for this group. There's a lot of upside with this group, but also very potential for this to also miss as a group as well. And then the Giants is, I don't know what the fuck to make of this group. Deontay, they have basically two rookies as their starting corners at the moment on the outside. Deonte Banks, who they drafted in the first round, who I loved coming out of Maryland. One of the smartest corners, if not the smartest corner in the draft. Especially from a zone standpoint. Very high IQ as a zone player. Excellent in man coverage. Great technique. Great athlete. He could have gone in the top 15 and I wouldn't have batted an eye at it. He's that good of a player. And then the other one is a 6th round pick. Brad Hawkins out of Old Dominion, I think it was. And I don't really know much about him. Apparently he's been dominant in camp. He's been running with the ones a lot. So, they probably hit something. I will have to wait and see what he looks like when it comes to the regular season. We'll have to wait and see. Adoree Jackson is listed as the slot receiver or the nickel at the moment. I said slot receiver, slot corner, excuse me. And Adoree Jackson is he's been a really good corner for a long time. Not elite, but he's good enough of an athlete to where you don't have to have him be this elite caliber player. Very technically sound, very good athlete. He is just a very good starting corner, especially in this system. And then the safeties are a huge question mark. Xavier McKinney, I'm expecting him to break out this year and assert himself as a true elite safety. He has the physical tools for it. Very good run defender, very good in pass protection, very good in pass coverage. But we're just waiting to see if he can take that step, and hopefully this year he can finally take that step into asserting himself as one of the top safeties in the league. And then Jason Pinnock is just sort of in a camp battle right now with who's not listed here, Bobby McCain. Right now, Pinnock is listed as the starting strong safety, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't know that much about Jason Pinnock. If he's beating out Bobby McCain, then maybe they might have just found something there, but it's a situation where we'll have to wait and see. So that is the secondary, and that is a wrap on the NFC East preview. And we will be back in a few days where we will be starting the North Division, starting with the AFC North. That'll be coming out over the next couple of days. I am really excited to talk about that division in particular. And like I said, if you have not already, please like, subscribe, and share the video. And we will be back in a few days for that AFC North preview. But with that being said, I am Double Diesel. Peace.